Hi everybody, this is Brandon with TechStep Academy, and today we, in addition to covering another element, how to find and manipulate another element, that being the drop down, I've added that down here, I'm going to give you a quick tour through some of the Selenium web tools, okay? Now, while that sounds kind of dry, I'm going to do it quickly. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm only going to go through the ones that I think are pertinent to us right now. But it is very important that you understand sort of, now that we've manipulated things, we've navigated a bit, we know how to find buttons and inputs and things like that, and that's fantastic, right? But what we really need to have at our disposal is a nice utility belt, right? You know, like Batman's got his utility belt, he's ready for any situation. If you want to actually automate professionally, then that's something that you need to develop, and I'm going to show you how to get it. Obviously, some of it's going to be repetition, right, practice, but this is sort of your Bible right here. What I'm looking at, and I will link this next to the video, these are the sort of the tools that Selenium has provided for us to use through specifically the Python API. Obviously, each language has its own API. We're only going to go over the most pertinent ones to us right now. So without further ado, I'll give you a demo on the right here of a couple of them. But without further ado, let's get started. So first, I want to hit up, you can see here, we've got WebDriver Common, WebDriver Support. This is just how they've decided to organize these different tools. The first one we're going to touch on is called Action Chains. Okay, I'm not going to demo this one, but I'm going to explain it really quickly. The reason action chains are very useful is depending on the kind of thing that you're testing, you may have to do a lot of things with the mouse, right? You may have to do things like double clicking, click and hold, right clicking, right? So if that's the type of testing that you're doing, then action chains is where you want to be. Not only because you can chain actions together, they're written in such a way where, for example, they've got some great examples here. So they find a menu element using find by CSS selector. They find a submenu element, and they can say, okay, well, pass that driver into action chains and then call move to element, and we'll move to that menu, right? And then let's click on that menu, click on the submenu that is inside that menu, and then go ahead and trigger that action. So this is how you can write several steps into one. More useful, though, is the fact that we can use some of these convenience methods here. So context click, that means right click, right? That's a big one. If you need to right click somewhere as part of your testing your GUI or your UI, your graphic user interface, then you would come here and import this context click, and that would allow you to right click. Drag and drop, if you're using a UI that gives you the ability to drag and drop files or really anything, then this is where you want to be, okay? Key down, that's a very useful one. That's going to be if we want to do a control alt, well, probably not a delete, that wouldn't be a good idea, but any of the alt F5, F6, a control, anything where you're pressing down a button and then another button, right? Or if you know there's a case where you want to test holding down a button, I don't know. That is where you will find that. Key up would be, the opposite, releasing that key. And just some other handy methods here. Move to element. Send keys would be, again, the same thing you've already seen us use, send keys. It's just you can do it as part of an action chain. So I don't expect you to remember all these right now. I just want you to know that they're out there. So if you need them, here is where they are. You can come looking for action chains. So next one I want to go over is the alert. Okay, we see that right here. Now, you may find in some situations, like for example here, if you click something and it causes an alert to pop up, right? So you see here, this is an alert. If you're trying to automate against that, right? So you are, for example, trying to determine, well, how do I click this OK button? And you'd have to make sure you're on the right focused window, right? There's other things that become more complex. So you can basically avoid all of the hassle of trying to manually do that and just create an alert object using this alert class as part of the webdriver.common, meaning these are commonly used tools, right? using the alert class. And I will show you, I'll give you a demo of this real quick because I think it's very useful and easy to do. So you can see over here, I've got a quick script that's just going to drop me into an automated session. I'm calling the Chrome driver, and then I'm just going to get the training ground, which you've seen before. And I'm going to use Python-I to give me basically an interactive session, which means once the script ends, it's just going to leave it open with all of the variables and everything in the same state, and then I can move around easily, right? So here's our first example. Let's do an alert. So you should see another window pop up. There we are. And here we are at the training ground. Okay, so I press a button and I have an alert here, right? Well, how do I get to that alert? So we're going to hop over here. I need to import this tool so I can use it, right? From webdriver.common. So I'll do it in the right place here. And let's get rid of this until later. So we'll say from selenium.webdriver.common.alert, import the alert class, right? And how do we create an alert? Well, it shows you here all you have to do is pass it what? A driver, right? A WebDriver object. And that's handy. So essentially you're passing it a driver and it's assuming that there is an alert visible on that page. So let's go ahead and try that. Alert equals alert, and our driver object is actually assigned to browser, as you see here. And well, I'm going to do it down here, otherwise I would have to rerun that script. Well, let's try that again. Sometimes I forget where we are. Pass it the driver. Okay. Yes. Again, I need to import it down here as part of my interactive session. We'll get there eventually. Okay. So alert equals the alert class, pass the browser in. That appears to be okay. Nothing exploded. So you see here some of the examples. Well, you can accept or dismiss. There's an authenticate, which we're not going to worry about today. If it was a regular username password, then we could go ahead and fill that out. And there is a send keys if you want to send keys specifically to an alert, which we're not going to do because there's nowhere to put it. There's no input on that alert. What we can do is look at this text. You see right here, gets the text of the alert. Well, that might be nice to test against, right? To perform an assert against that if we were testing. Like let's say the requirements say an alert, when I click this button, an alert should pop up telling the user whatever, right? So I can assert against that. Well, let's go ahead and see. There you are. You click button 1. Does that look familiar? Indeed it does. You click button 1. So we're in the right place. All right, so let's get rid of that alert now. So we see that we have some options. We can accept or dismiss. In this case, because there is no OK or cancel, right? They're really going to do the same thing. You could call either of them, but for appearance's sake, we'll accept it just to be nice, right? So we see that there. Let's see if it works. So alert.accept. Boom. So you can see how that makes it much easier to work with alerts, okay? So again, I don't expect you to memorize this. Just know that it's there. If you are working with alerts, you can dig around in here and find the alert tools and go ahead and implement those. Okay, so moving on. Keys. Again, we're not going to hit all of these, just the big ones. We'll circle back to the rest of these later as we get a little bit more advanced. So I'm not going to demo keys right now. You recall when I said that you could use action chains to control this, you know, left control, hold control, and then hold Alt and press some other button, right? Well, instead of passing those action chain strings, you would actually pass them key objects, and here is where the key objects are stored. So you could look here and say, okay, well, I can import keys and just call arrow down or command, right? Control, hold down control. So anytime you're messing with the keyboard keys and you want to hold those down, things like that, this is where you would go. You would import this and use these key objects. Okay, now to another important one, touch actions. right here. So I am not going to and can't demo this right now because we're on a desktop. But if you are someone who ends up testing against touchscreens, right, anything with a touchscreen, and you are automating against that, here's where you would go to find all of the utilities that allow you to do that conveniently. So you can see right off the bat, what are some of the tools we have here? We can double tap, we can flick, right? We can flick based on speed in pixels per second. This looks very complex. It doesn't look very fun. So I'm glad I don't have to do this yet. If you need to long press, you can do that. Move things around. So again, tap, tap, and hold. These are all very similar to what you've seen before with the mouse. It's just they are built to work on touch screens. Okay. And next one up is expected conditions. So we're going to talk about expected conditions down here. This is under the support. Expected conditions, let's talk about it in terms of the weight, right? So I'm going to go over weight first, and then we'll discuss the expected conditions because they sort of go in tandem a lot of the times when they're used. So quick discussion about weight. If someone steps into an interview and they say that they have front-end automation knowledge, right? And I'm interviewing them, one of the questions I will always ask is, okay, well, what would you do if you have a page that loads slowly and it's causing your automation to break, right? Or you have an element that takes a while to load. Maybe there's some back-end calls, right, to populate the screen. Maybe the network's a little slow today, and it breaks your test. What would you do? And if they tell me, well, I would use a time.sleep to wait for that to load, then I know that, okay, they might not be as experienced as they're saying they are, right? They might not have been exposed to some of the better practices in automation. The reason I say that is, if you follow me over here to my screen, if I do something like, let's go ahead and get rid of our alert. If I say something like, in fact, I'll just do it down here. We'll import time. You know, I could say do this, and then time.sleep, I don't know, 3 seconds. And I'm going to do a bad thing and do this on the same line, just for the sake of the demonstration. Okay, it's going to sleep for 3 seconds, and then it's going to print do that, right? Now, what I'm trying to get across here is you are sleeping, or you are waiting for a minimum of 3 seconds, and you are waiting for a maximum of 3 seconds. You will always wait for 3 seconds before you print do that. Now, in automation, if all we're trying to achieve is, the problem we're trying to solve is that, well, sometimes this takes a long time to load, then what we don't want to throw in, just guess, right, and say, well, when I put in 5 seconds, it seems to work, right? That seems to cover all of the slow cases. Well, that might be okay in the first test, right? But what about when you write your second test that does that? And the third, and the fifth, and the 20th, and the 200th. You can see where these sleeps add up, and every time you add a sleep in your test run, you're adding that number of seconds minimum, right, to your test run. Now, in the real world, I've actually seen a test suite that had just on sleeps alone took over 3 hours. That means that if the code actually ran in no time at all, you would still be waiting for 3 hours for your automation to run. There was no need for that. So what's the alternative, right? Well, the alternative is to use what we would call an explicit wait, right? Or just, we're going to use the WebDriver wait up here. So how that works is, basically, you see here, there's some good documentation. You can definitely take your time and read through this. It's not long, right? You see that basically it's saying, well, you can assign an element by saying call WebDriver wait. You just pass it the driver. 10 is the default timeout. And you can wait until some such thing happens, right? So here they pass it a lambda. We don't have to talk about that right now. Just what I want to get across is you're waiting until something happens. And if that thing happens, then great. You perform the assignment to element. If it doesn't happen, you're going to end up raising a timeout exception, right? So you see down here, all we have to work with is until or until not. Meaning if I'm waiting for a window to close, I could say, well, wait until there's not a window there. If I'm waiting for a window to open, well, wait until that window opens. So I'm going to give you a quick example of that. Real quick, you can see that all we have to worry about is pass it a driver. You can give it a timeout if you want. And if you want, you can even change the polling frequency, meaning check back every half a second, check back every second, 2 seconds, whatever you want, okay? And let's go ahead and talk about expected conditions, because that goes hand in hand with wait. So here are the expected conditions. Now, there's a lot of them, but I'm going to go to the ones that I see the most, okay? So these are things that you could add on to that wait until, right? Just say it in a sentence. Wait until what? Well, why don't we wait until, the visibility of all elements that are located here, right? The visibility of, let's wait until the title contains whatever text. Let's wait until a new window is opened, right? One that we're going to test today is let's wait until an alert is present, okay? So that seems pretty handy, right? If we wait until an alert is present, then you just saw we did a little exercise with an alert earlier. I'm going to show you what this looks like. So here are 2 different ways of tackling this problem. Whoops, let's not delete everything there. So let's go ahead and set up a wait. Well, we'll perform an action first. So our automation is going to take us to the training ground, right? And once it's there, we are going to print something, say, I have arrived. And then we are going to perform a wait for an alert to pop up, right? So what does that look like? Well, let's go ahead and from selenium.webdriver.support.wait, import that wait class, right? Sorry, WebDriver wait. And we want an expected condition, right? I said these go hand in hand. So I need to import alert is present. So from selenium.webdriver.support.expectedConditions, import alert is present. I'm sorry the text is going long, but I keep it big so you can see it without having to maximize your screen in case you want to follow along with me, right? So again, that is alert is present, and you'll see it on the screen in just a minute. So let's go ahead and try to perform that wait, right? WebDriver wait. Let's look back at how we do this. Again, we don't have to memorize it. We can just take a look. Documentation says it needs a driver. So we'll pass it the browser, which again is our driver. And we're going to wait until. Now here's where stuff gets really easy. What do we want to wait until? Well, until the alert is present, right? And we're calling this. This is a function, right? Okay, so an alert appeared. Now, you might not be able to do this with apparently timeout is a required argument. So we'll say 10 seconds is the timeout. So we'll say an alert appeared, right? Once it does. So what I expect is we're going to get that driver. It should go to the training ground, print I have arrived, and then if an alert happens to pop up, which I'm going to help, it will say an alert appeared. So let's go ahead and see that in action. Let's give ourselves a clean mise en place here. Get rid of our old window, which has been hanging out. Here we go. Okay, so you can see I have arrived. So there's nothing down here yet. Now watch for it. Boom. Do you see that? The alert's here, and it says an alert appeared. I'm going to do that one more time just to show you how quickly that happened. So here we go again. We've arrived. It says I have arrived. Now I want you to look down here, okay? I'm going to go and click this button right now. boom, an alert appeared. That took less than a second, right, upon that happening. If you were using a time.sleep and assuming that something was going to click that button, then aside from the fact that it might break if the button takes too long, you would be waiting for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever would capture whatever would work every single time, right? And you see here that with a little bit of extra ingenuity, we can avoid all that. So when you're sitting in an interview and someone asks you, what do you do if something is slow? You need to use a WebDriver wait. We call this an explicit wait because we are explicitly telling it what it is waiting for, as opposed to an implicit wait, which would just be something that is, I don't like the way that these names are laid out. You're going to hear this a lot. An implicit wait is, in the Selenium parlance, is basically saying, I am setting up this wait that occurs throughout the entire session, no matter what you're doing. That obviously is not very useful because you want to tailor your wait to whatever you're doing. So you should be using what we call an explicit wait for pretty much everything. Not pretty much. You should use it for everything. And WebDriver wait is the class that will get you there. Okay. So let's move along. I think we've made that point quite clear. I will clean up my workspace here. Okay, so next, and again, we're almost done here. The last thing we have is the drop-down. I promised last tutorial that we were going to hit the drop-down this time, and I'm not going to leave you hanging. So the drop-down. This is actually called a select element. Again, you see we have a nice little office theme going here. Bears beats Battlestar Galactica. It's a drop-down that has 3 things. Now, if I wanted to mess with this, right, we could do the usual thing. Okay, get me a select. Here's my options. Now, this could allow me to scrape this and find out what the values are. But how do I know which one is selected, right? This doesn't tell me that. None of the, even if I move this around, okay, I select beats, right? This doesn't tell me anything on the DOM about which one is selected, so I can't really scrape that. I would have to probably come up with something much more verbose to figure that out. So there's no reason to do any of that. What I want you to remember is if you're dealing with a dropdown or a select element, then you need to go to your tools and go to the select class. Okay, so you can see that they've given us this nice handy utility, select. All it takes is the web element of the select, and we're off to the races. What can we do with the select object? We can get all the selected options. We can deselect them either by index, meaning 0, the first index, the second one, the third one. In Python, this starts with 0, right? So 0, 1, 2, 3. Deselect by value, which we saw the value right here, first, second, third. Or we can deselect, this is the most readable, deselect by visible text. Now, I will caution you, this is what we're going to use today for the demo. I will caution you that if you have localization, meaning your product changes languages, someone can click on a language bar and choose Chinese or Japanese or whatever, I wouldn't use this if I were you, because suddenly the drop-down is not what you thought it was. I would use a value or an index. Probably a value, because someone could change the order later. An index is a little bit brittle. Value, until that changes, is going to be your best bet most of the time. Anyway, not to get too deep into that, just a little nugget of wisdom there. So first selected option. If you just want to see the first one that's selected, in our case there should only be one, you can use that. Options is one we're going to see today. It returns all the options, which could be good for validating, right? I expect that when I go to this dropdown, there should be 3 options, and they are Bears beats Battlestar Galactica. So this is how we would get at those, right, to assert them. And here you have the selects. Again, just by index, by value, or by visible text. So let's go ahead and get started. I know I need to import it. So from webdriver.support.select, import to the select class, right? And I know that before I can actually create this, I have to give it what? A web element. That means I actually have to have a web element. And to get a web element, if you recall, I'm going to have to, we'll call it cell. Cell equals browser dot do what? Find element by, and let's use ID. That's the quickest one for now, since I know where we want to finish up here. Whoops. Cell 1. That seems to match what we have over here. Indeed. Okay. So let's see if it works. Okay. No, oh, of course, I'm not running it, so we're not going to know. You can tell it's late. We're not going to know until we run the script. I'm just going to trust that my reckless nature is going to get us through this. So once we have that, we need to go ahead and create the select object. So we'll say mySelect equals select, and we pass in what? The web element. So cell is our web element. We just defined it right here. So I pass that in. And what do we want to do? Well, again, I'm going to let this drop us into the script, and then I'll continue from here. So using that handy dandy python-i tools.py, I expect a new window to open up. You're not going to see anything yet because it will perform that assignment. Okay, so now let's do some work. What is mySelect? Well, it's a select object. So it did work out. We got what we expected. Well, let's do something. What can we do? Why don't we, I mentioned we could assert the options, look at the options. Let's do that. Well, there you are. Not very pretty, but you see that we have a list. You can tell by this thing here. We have a list of all of the web elements inside there. Now, this is kind of hard to make out. I will go ahead and perform a quick list comprehension here, and we'll look at the text for each of the elements inside mySelect.options. And there we are. We see that we did get bears, beats, and Battlestar Galactica. So we could perform that assert and say that we got everything we expected, right? Now, what if we wanted to choose one of them, right? Well, we see select by index, select by value. I said today we're going to select by visible text, again, because we're only using English today, so it's not going to break. I would caution you against doing this against most products, because most products have localization, meaning other languages. But for the sake of readability, this is the easiest. So let's select by visible text. What visible text should we choose? Let's choose a hard one. Battlestar Galactica. Okay. Battlestar. Trying to get the spacing and the capitalization right. Okay, so I want you to come over here and watch this. Watch this drop down. And here we are. Boom. See that? Battlestar Galactica. Great, right? Well, what if I have localization, you say? What do I do? Well, let's try selecting by index, right? So I can do that. Let's select by index 0 would be the first one, which should give us bears, right? So again, I'm going to type 0 here for the index. Watch the drop down. 3, 2, 1. Boom. It's like a magic trick, right? There you go. Bears. And why not? Let's just do the one other option we have. Let's select by value. And we see that these are named first, second, and third. Well, the only one that hasn't gotten any love is beats, which is going to be second, right? If we look over here, that is value second. So let's put second in here. Let's get ready for the magic trick. Okay, watch over here on the drop down. 3, 2, 1, and there we are. Those are your 3 methods of selecting. So again, that is how you create a select object and use it to do very, very, very convenient work on a drop-down. That's how you manipulate it and how you strip. Oh, you know what? We'll do one other thing. Let's choose the first selected one. So we can, let's say we want to actually assert that it actually shows what we expected, right? So first selected option. Well, first selected option. Okay, so it gave me the actual element. and I can just grab the text from it, and we see that it is beats. That is indeed correct. So I could assert that, right? If I wanted to assert that when I chose whatever index that it, appeared, that beats appeared, that's how we would do it. Choose your first selected option. So again, that's how you would validate it. All right. So what did we go over today? That's going to be everything we're going to do. We went over action chains, right? We said that those were for when you needed to do a lot of stuff with the mouse. Okay, double click, right click, click and hold, things like that. Drag and drop, keys down if you're holding down Control and Alt and all that. This is where you would find it. We went over alerts. I gave you a demo of it, right? Where you could create an alert class and use it to dismiss, accept, and get the text of the alert. All right. Next, we talked about keys, which is just something you would use usually in tandem with action chains anytime you need to mess with the Control key or the Shift key or whatever, right? Here's where you would find those objects. You can't just type that in as a string. Oh, hold down Control. It doesn't work like that. So we talked about touch actions real quick. That's if you are working with a touch screen, right? Then this is going to be where you're going to do a lot of your work. Double tapping, moving things around, flicking, tapping and holding, right? We talked about the tandem expected conditions and wait. So we did the demo of if you want to wait, then you should wait like a smart person, right? And only wait as long as you have to. So wait until something happens. Don't use time.sleep in a browser automation use case. So you would go to expected conditions. What do I want to wait for? Either the alert is present. Maybe I want to wait for the visibility of an element, meaning an element appears on screen. Let's see. Let's wait for some text to be present in the. There's tons of these, right? That the URL contains a certain word. Usually you're going to see something like visibility of element located. By the way, this is a great thing to wrap up your, if you have a way of finding elements in your framework, which we're going to talk about in another series, this is how we do it. Every single time that you tell me you want to find an element, I go ahead and I perform a wait for free, and I wait to make sure that that element is visible, right? That way tests break like way, way, way less often. And finally, we talked about select. You see here, again, you can select by value, by index, and by visible text down here, right? And you can also scrape all the options out of it to validate, and you can scrape the first selected option to validate. So what I really want you to take from this, you don't have to remember all this. It's just you need to remember that there is an API, there's API documentation out there. And if you want to be good at this, right, and you want to be competent, and you want to be able to solve problems quickly and in the best way possible, you need to be familiar with what tools are available to you. Again, be like Batman, right? Have a good utility belt, know when to use it. We'll talk about more of these as we move forward, but not next time. Next time, we're going to get back into automation, and I can't wait to be there with you. I'm Brandon Blair with TextUp Academy. I appreciate you for sitting through this.